playoff pressure. The fantasy MLR playoffs are set following an exciting round 14 of Major League Rugby. With the first round of fantasy playoff matchups upon us, a do or die week for some fantasy managers, we take a look back at the top performers from this past weekend, talk a little bit about playoff lineup strategy, and of course, look ahead to a high stakes round 15 in the world of fantasy MLR. The Fantasy Rucker Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 67 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. And after an exciting round 14 in Major League Rugby, the fantasy MLR playoffs are set. And some league members on the right side of things here, some not so much. You might be able to tell here on the way of the facial expressions on my hosts here, Matt Yee, Devin Vanderpool, on how the week played out in terms of their playoff futures.
Hey, Vandy, how'd it go, man? How'd it go? You gonna let the people know how it went? The people are they just want to know how it went, man.
They've been rooting for you, Vandy. They've been rooting for you, man.
You know what? I gave it a valiant effort, okay?
True.
NOLA and their lineups screwed me.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a tough one, and we're going to break that all down. But yeah, I mean, to be fair, both of you having a little bit tough showings here in round 14. Matt just being able to take the heat a little bit more. Vandy, I know it came down to the wire for you. We talked about it all last episode. You got it done against the big man in round 13. You just needed the victory here in round 14. Just couldn't get that done. But hey, big improvements, though, from 2022, man. I think there's something to be said about that, right? Still a little bit.
It's too early for the bright side, brother.
Salt's still on the wound. It's still fresh injury. But yeah, we're gonna break that. There you go. Well, we're gonna break it all down. We're gonna talk about the playoff picture that we have heading into our second ever fantasy MLR playoffs. The race for the name to get etched on this championship jersey behind me here is on, and right now it's going to be interesting. We got our first round of playoffs coming up here in round 15. Two of our top teams getting a bye. Four other teams going to duke it out to get and book their ticket into that semi-final of the fantasy MLR playoff. But we'll get into that playoff picture in just a bit. Obviously, we're going to talk about the exciting round 14 that was, break down the players that performed for some of these teams in this past round, and then obviously look ahead to round 15 and break down what is to come, as now it is do or die here moving forward here in the world of fantasy MLR. But hey, if you haven't already, like we say at every single episode, if you haven't started doing it, follow us at the Fantasy Ruckers. Handle is up above there on the YouTube screen. Details in the description below in our podcast. Been a lot of fun this season so far, and if there's any better time to start following along, it's going to be for this exciting playoff race to come. We also got a Discord community that's been a lot of fun to take part in and participate in. And if that's not enough as well, we do have our website, thefantasyruckers.com, with all the stats that you can think of, from fantasy to just stats that you want to digest here to see how your players are doing on your favorite team. You can do that, and of course get the latest updates on the Fantasy Ruckers League. But hey, let's move on here, guys, and let's start talking about some of the latest that's happening around the league before we get into all of the latest in the Fantasy Ruckers League. Not too much here moving forward as teams start to solidify what they're going to be doing here down the home stretch of the 2023 MLR season. But a couple exciting news. Good to see. We're going to get into it, but a big Dallas Jackals win against Rugby Atlanta. I guess that pushed them to say, hey, maybe we should create an academy side here, and maybe we should start developing the rugby here in Texas, and that's what the Dallas Jackals are going to do. They announced that they have begun their Dallas Jackals Academy, a new initiative to grow rugby talent in the North Texas region. Always a good sign to see that these clubs are getting their hands into the roots of their local rugby programs.
Yeah, I mean, finally, I feel like every other club had an academy side except them. So glad they're finally doing it. Hopefully that can buy them a couple more wins next year. See how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. All right. More pressing news, though. Big time announcement here for a player that I would say was pretty pretty impactful in the world of fantasy MLR, especially in last season. Big time tackle machine up there. He was tied for 7th in the league in tackles in 2022. A lot of hope that he was going to translate that into the 2023 fantasy MLR season with the addition of our tackles into these stats. But Old Glory DC lock Stan South has announced that he is hanging up the boots. It is the end of his playing career due to injury, which is unfortunate. I believe he suffered that injury. I believe either was it in training earlier in the season.
It was like right after week 1.
Yeah, it was very, very early on. He says in a tweet on Twitter, hanging up my boots, or excuse me, on Instagram. I've been lucky enough to play in multiple countries around the world to play a game that I love. Due to my latest injury, my rugby playing time has come to an end. Gutted that this is how my playing career has finished, but I'd like to say thank you to players and coaches that helped me through the years. I was very lucky to have played for some of the top flight clubs along the way. Thank you all. On to the next chapter. Much love. And again, this is a guy that was tied for 7th in the league in 2022 for tackles. 24 MLR caps with Old Glory DC between 21 and this this season. Again, a guy that was really had a lot of hope to be one of those outlier second row guys that you could count on here in fantasy MLR to rack you up some points. Just didn't pan out here, and unfortunately it's due to injury.
Yeah, I mean, he came out hot with a basically 8-point performance in the first week that he played. So, I mean, that would have been big. But hey, time's got to come for everybody, and it just happened to come for him. He had a great career to show for it.
Absolutely. All right. Now, shifting on here to some signings that we need to catch on from the last week ahead of round 13's matchups. Interesting enough, I mean, we mentioned it in our Discord channel. Some of the guys mentioned it that everyone thought that the sign and trade deadline happened weeks ago, but apparently that's not the case because signings continue to happen ahead of round 13. The New England Free Jacks signing James Hilterbrand, front rower. He appeared in the matchup this past week, and then also Chris Hilsenbeck, U.S. eligible fly half, signing with Rugby Atlanta. 2 names that are joining their respective squads there. How this sign and trade deadline actually works, have no idea. But apparently signings can continue to happen throughout the year despite the deadline being in place.
It's meant to reflect real life. And with enough money, you do whatever the hell you want.
Don't tell Mr. Gilchrist about that one. He
ran out of money. Other way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But hey, talking about signings though, what is Brian Ray, American Rugby News, lying to us about Ruben DeHaas? This guy was supposed to be in Houston like 3 weeks ago, and now there's not even enough games left in the season for him to play to play in the playoffs. So why? I thought American Rugby News was our source of truth. What the heck, Brian Ray? You know, you can't bring up that stuff to fantasy managers. People were probably saving fab to get this guy. Yeah,
I guess we'll see. But hey, nonetheless, though, I mean, even with an appearance there, I mean, there are a whole bunch of other signs. We'll get into it in the matchup. But hey, a little bit of a teaser to Bodine Waka not even making an appearance in this past matchup, and a lot of fab was dropped on him. But we'll break that down in just a moment's time here when we get through the round 13 matchups. But hey, before we get there, let's give the people a little update of how the Fantasy Ruckers League is going in a Commissioner Yee's League update.
Yeah, it's been like a week removed from me being able to be excited about this part, so I'm gonna
wish we could say you were missed.
Oh, come on, Van.
Got him.
Hear ye,
come on.
Hear ye, hear ye.
All right, hear ye, hear ye. Here is Commissioner Yee with a Fantasy Ruckers League update. And again, the playoff picture has been set after round 14's fantasy matchups. Again, unfortunate display there for the Rucking Goat. Yours truly, Devin Vandy Vanderpool, falling short to Rugby Wrap Up 70 to 50.9. Not enough to buy himself a ticket into the Fantasy MLR playoffs. He's still searching for his first playoff appearance. But Vandy close, but no cigar.
King of the toilet bowl, baby. That's what you are, Vandy.
Man.
Yeah, Rugby Wrap-Up coming up with a big-time win there. He gets his place into the playoffs. Shifting on over to the next matchup. Matt, a little bit of tough stretch here for you. Back-to-back losses. Last week against Vandy. Now this week against Rugby Morning, who puts up an absolute heater of a point total. 108.3, highest point total of the week for any team in Fantasy MLR. You got 72.5. Any concerns moving forward? You still do. You still do have that top spot in the Fantasy Ruckers League. You got that bye. So does Rugby Morning, though. But hey,
I clinched it like I don't know, it feels like 10 weeks ago I clinched the top spot. So I've been resting my guys. You know, even the fantasy players, they need a little rest when you get ready for the playoffs. Give them a nice 3-week rest, including that bye next week. Get ready for that semifinal matchup. Got no concerns over here. That's why I got my Japanese robot to show just how relaxed I am.
There you go. All right. Well, 94.2 to 73.5 between the Dankus Angers and Eagles overseas. A big time matchup there as well. Dankus Anchors with the win buys himself a ticket into the playoff, into the first round of playoffs as well. MLR stats, not enough to get that first round bye. Rugby Morning just putting up a too big of a point total in this past week, but 91.4 to 65.3 against MLR All Access. Give me the Loots. Still a reputable point total there, just not enough. But he will be in the playoffs for sure. And then this one's the big one that obviously affected you, Vandy. Just Steven cannot get it done for you to beat Lads on Tour. Lads on Tour putting up 89.1 to 60.4 for him to squeak in and get that last playoff spot ahead of you with a 29-point differential in that points for. That just really bit you there at the end.
That's your boy,
you know what?
Andy.
Started
he couldn't do it for you. That's your boy.
Yeah, you know what? Started 0-4, and you know what? Happy where I ended up. Good week, Matt.
I thought it was too early for silver linings.
Yeah,
Stop
well,
lying to us.
I'm about to start crying, so I mean,
stop lying to the people.
This is what we get.
All right, well, so just break it down for the people. You have a look at our standings that obviously you can check out at thefantasyruckers.com. Ruck and Roll Matt's team is up top still 11-3. He's got his first round bye. He'll be able to take a little bit of a break here in round 15. What are you going to do, Matt? Are you going to take it easy? What are you going to do with your time off?
I'm going to take a nice relax. Yeah, I'm going to take it easy, but look, it's a good time that it came. Nola goals on bye this upcoming week. I need JP Duplessis in my playoff team. So it's a nice little timing for this bad boy.
There you go. All right. Well, Rugby Morning, he gets a bye as well. 9-5 record, finishes second on the season with the 1,150.2 point total over MLR stats, about 43 points above him. And yeah, MLR stats with that same record, 9-5, finishes in that third spot. He'll be taking on the former fantasy MLR champion, or the latest fantasy MLR champion, Lads on Tour, the man who has the only person that has his name on the championship jersey behind me. They'll duke it out in the first round. Lads on Tour with a 7-7 record, finishing in that sixth spot. And then you got the Dankus Anchors and Rugby Wrap Up facing off in the other bye week playoff matchup. 8-6 record, both of them. Dankus Anchors, though, has the pretty big point total over him, about 80 points over Rugby Wrap Up. We'll see. Should be an interesting matchup there as well. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting, man. It's the playoff picture is clear here, moving forward, and it's going to be interesting to see who makes it out, and we'll face the two that have bye. Matt, as we move on here to break down some of these round 14 matchups, is there anyone that you'd prefer to take on here in this first?
Call out.
I mean, hey, look, it doesn't really matter. They're all going to be losers at the end of the day.
I guess we'll see. And
fired.
At this point in time, it will be Ruck and Roll who will face the winner of either the of Dankus Anchors and Rugby Wrap Up, unless JJ can come up with a big time upset against MLR stats. We'll see whether or not it's the case. Ruck and Roll will take the lowest seed team in this first semifinal, and then Rugby Morning taking the higher seed coming up in the semifinal. Should be an interesting one again. The race to get this championship jersey behind me has been set. And hey, congratulations again for a well-fought season for the other four team members: Ruck and Goat, Eagles Overseas, Feral Hippies, MLR All Accesses, Give Me the Loots. A tough go here in this one. Vandy, you're really tight. Eagles Overseas was tight. Tough one for Steven, who, Vandy, we were talking before, a little bit of a shock there for a guy who obviously has invested so much into MLR, but I guess that just goes to show you how unpredictable fantasy really is, and how, as much work as you put into it, fantasy is often an unforgiving mistress that will not really give back the same that you put in. And I know you've learned it the hard way in other sports, and it's obviously evident here between some of the guys, you, Bill Baker of Eagles Overseas, Stevens, Feral Hippies, and MLR. So give me the Loots.
Yeah, you know what? Shout out to the boys, eh? I'll pour one out for you this weekend when I have a beer.
There we go. All right. Well, let's shift on here now to the round 14 matchups. A lot of exciting ones here this past week. I think we got a whole nice little mix of blowout matches. We didn't have any like crazy low point totals, which was nice, except for some teams, obviously. But in terms of a totality of a game, not really of any low point scoring. So it lended itself to a pretty exciting fantasy MLR week, which is always a good. Our first Thursday night rugby matchup of the season. Tough turnaround for Old Glory DC, who obviously came off the short break, taking on the Toronto Arrows in Toronto, so they had to travel north of the border. And it ended up being a nail biter right to the end. Toronto had the opportunity to seal the win with a final kick, couldn't get it done, ends in a draw. 29-29. I believe James Dealey tweeted out on his MLR Stats Twitter page that this is the first time in MLR history that a team has gone back-to-back weeks with a tie. But hey, once again, Toronto just falling short. I know earlier in the season they went for a win with the final boot, and they couldn't get it done there. Ended up falling short there. But this week, it's kind of same deal. But at least they get to squeak out the tie here.
Yeah, what the heck? I don't know why they're celebrating so much about these back-to-back ties. I mean, they can't even buy a win. They've gone on one on the season. They're like looking like the Dallas Jackals of old. So I don't know. Rough season for the Toronto Arrows. I'm starting to think that Deshaun Bowen might have the worst hands in the MLR. But it is what it is. That guy. He scores the try at the end, but man, was he just dropping balls left and right.
See that play by Peter Nelson when the ball was in the air and he just spun around, knocked it out of the air right to his homie?
Yeah.
That was badass.
Yeah.
I will say it's shocking because when you look at the standings, somehow the way that things have shaken out, Old Glory DC has managed to stay in the second spot in the Eastern Conference, but they really needed the win here. Obviously, the loss
Eastern
of Rugby
Conference
Atlanta
stinks.
they'll get to. It's true. Very competitive there.
They
after
literally
the New England
hate
Free
winning
Jacks.
in that conference.
But yeah, Old Glory DC obviously getting at least the tie there to at least get some points out there. But let's break down here some of the top performers from this matchup. We'll start on the Toronto Arrows side of it. I mean, hey, good to see Tuatasi Tasi back in the lineup there. He looked pretty solid. 100 meters gained, 10 tackles. He racked up a total of 16 fantasy points there with the breakdown steal in the total 81 total minutes played. He should be a guy that will be interesting to see. He's a free agent right now, so maybe there's a team that needs a center there heading into this first playoff week. He might be a guy that you are possibly considering. Another guy we got to bring up, Kieran Breen, looked pretty solid there in the back three, 78 meters gained, scored the try, 5 tackles as well. Again, 14.8 fantasy points to total up with that, with the addition of those 5 tackles there. So there are, I mean, what's your opinion, guys, here? There are points to be had with this Toronto Arrows team, but how much are you trusting these guys, especially now that things are on the line here with the playoffs right around the corner?
I mean, they're putting up points though. That's the thing. Like, it's not like they're losing like they were early in the season where they're just getting blown out and it looked like men against boys, So they're scoring points here. It's good to see that some of these guys, especially guys like you brought up, like Ryan, you brought up Tasi, guys like Ross Brody really showing up here. Like Ross Brody has been going on a tear these past few weeks. And it's good to see. I think I think as long as they continue to score points, it's something that you can, you can trust in them.
Sure. Ross Brody with 10.9 fantasy points this season, 18 meters gained, obviously scored that sniping try there in this matchup, 7 tackles as well. And then the last guy, I mean, you mentioned him lacking the hand, or excuse me, not lacking the hands, but not Deshaun Bowen.
Yes. Yeah. I thought you were going to say Deshaun Bowen.
Well, Deshaun Bowen, who you're mentioning there, he had a pretty good day, obviously scoring that last final minute try there, 12.4 fantasy points when he scored that try to kind of save his fantasy night. 4 turnovers there, 4 tackles. But
4 turnovers, one of them leading directly to a try.
Yeah, that was bad, man.
Fair enough. But I will say, though, Liam Bowman, looking pretty solid. First appearance at home for the Toronto Arrows. 57 minutes played, a try, 62 meters gained, 7 tackles. So like you said, Matt, there are points to be had here, but I will forewarn a little bit of a teaser ahead to our preview. This is a Toronto Arrows team that's going to be taking on the New England Free Jacks, though, in round 15. Not sure.
Don't want that smoke.
You can trust some of these guys for your bye week matchup heading into these fantasy playoffs. All right, shifting over to the other side of things. Pretty solid stuff here. I think the big one is obviously Penny Lasaka. He did really good for Old Glory DC, scoring some big time points, over 100 meters gain for his squad there, totaling up at 18.5 fantasy points, 101 meters gain, like I said, a try, 81 minutes played, and 8 tackles. He looked pretty solid there. Also want to mention Jamison Faunana Schultz. He's been pretty consistent. He's been a pleasant surprise there for this entirety of this fantasy season, I'll say. 16.4 fantasy points in this one, 44 meters gain, 15 tackles, 2 try assists, add a try in there as well. He has scored over double-digit scoring in every single matchup dating back to round 5 that he's played in, except for round 12, which is pretty incredible. He's only not scored double digits in 3 of the fantasy matches that he's started in, which is pretty crazy. So Jamison Faunana Schultz, a guy that, coming into the season, didn't really know what to expect from him, but clearly one of the marquee back rowers for this fantasy 2023 MLR season.
And hey, we got to talk about another surprise guy, though, William Talatena. I mean, the guy continues to get double-digit points. The guy continues to impress in more ways than one, whether that's meters gained, whether that's getting 18 tackles this week and 1 try assist. I mean, the guy clearly knows how to do it all. So, he's been a pleasant surprise, and a lucky fantasy owner there is just loving having him on his squad.
Yeah, he's definitely been, especially because he's been so good at scoring tries. Didn't get one this week, but yeah, he has gone every single week except for when he started in round 4. That was the only week that he scored less than 10 fantasy points. Every single week since then, he has scored double-digit fantasy points, 11.4 in this past one in round 14 with those 30 meters gained, the try assist, and the 18 tackles there. And yeah, pretty impressive stuff. A center that's definitely pretty dependable for you in this fantasy MLR season. All right, anyone else that you want to mention in this one? A lot of tries coming off of the bench, which is obviously not a great thing for fantasy MLR. John Lefebvre scoring 1, Tito Diaz-Bonilla scoring 1 as well, Marcos Young scoring 1. You obviously didn't necessarily have those guys in your lineups, seeing them that they were coming off the bench. But yeah, a lot of point production coming off of that bench for Old Glory DC.
Yeah, not much else to say there. Let's get on to the biggest win of the week. Ryan.
Are the biggest win of the week?
The biggest win, eh? Utah.
Right. Biggest win.
All right.
Come on.
We're going off. I don't think Matthew's alluding to Utah. He's alluding to the big time Dallas Jackals victory over Rugby Atlanta, getting their second victory of their season, coming out of the basement of the Western Conference. I think this might be
first ever victory away from home.
First ever victory away from home. They get it 27-19 over Rugby Atlanta. I believe it was pretty much scoreless early on for I believe like the first 30 minutes of the game. And then them kind of duking back and forth, and then Dallas really pulling away with things. And I believe it was a late try by Rugby Atlanta that made it seem a lot closer than it really was between these two sides. But hey, good for the Dallas Jackals coming away with a big time victory, and really puts a damper on Rugby Atlanta's playoffs hopes moving forward. That was a big time loss for Rugby Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, look, Rugby Atlanta just continued to make mistakes, give away penalties, giving Dallas Jackals essentially a chance to really build phases and have an offense. And the Dallas Jackals came out and played their best game of the season. So, it was great to see, I think, to see Dallas play that way. And clearly, if you're in the West and you need some wins, you just play an Eastern Conference team and you can get them.
No kidding. Looking at it, I mean, I was very impressed with the Dallas set piece. They looked pretty solid. Obviously, two set piece tries there. DeWalt Coetzee being the guy that really benefited from that. But that's solid. And I think we've talked about, I think, the Dallas Jackals set piece in the past, and this isn't the first time I believe that this set piece has performed for fantasy MLR purposes. Is your mentality after this win sort of shifting with this Dallas Jackals team? And I'm not necessarily saying that they're skyrocketing up your power ranks or anything like that, but are they slowly moving away from the Toronto Arrows of the world, of the Chicago Hounds of the world, and kind of in this middle, lower tier space after this victory? Maybe you could put them with, the NOLA Gold and how they've struggled over the past few weeks. Are Dallas Jackals kind of starting to look like they're a team that you can trust a little bit more here in fantasy MLR?
It's still their total points for that scare me. I think they're second last in points for on the year.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Because
so I mean, as hot as they could
one.
get, you don't want up and down. Like especially in the playoffs, man. You don't. There's no risk
Kind of the
to be
same.
had.
It's kind of the same with Toronto. There, like, yes, they've shown that they can score points, but are they always going to score points?
Yeah,
That's the question, right?
And like, I don't know who tried to do that clear and then it hit the Rugby Atlanta player, bounce right in the air, easy try. But you make those mistakes against a better team, they don't give those back.
Yeah, Rugby Atlanta stunk.
Well, Rugby Atlanta did not look good in this one. Tough one there for the squad. Obviously, one, like I said, that they should have been taken away. Let's start off with Dallas Jackals players, though, first. We mentioned him, obviously, DeWalt Coatsy having his best season or best game of the season from a fantasy MLR perspective. 75 minutes played, scoring those 2 tries off of the set piece, 7 meters gained, 13 tackles as well. Always love to see a big man performing here for fantasy MLR.
Yeah.
Got to give props to Sam Gala as well. He's a guy
Player
obviously that we've highlighted throughout this year. Has had a little bit of a rough stretch here from a fantasy perspective. It's been about 3 weeks since he's scored above 7 points here in round 14, able to rack up 14 points in 82 minutes played with that try, 29 meters gained, and 17 tackles. So Sam Gala, again, solidifying his name as the rookie of the year. Matt, you mentioned player of the week as well, and pretty solid. I think you're pretty happy with the performance that he had over the weekend. And then Thomas Milanos, he's a guy also that played pretty well for the Dallas Jackals. 17.7 fantasy points there in 82 minutes played, 53 meters gained, a try, 8 tackles, and 2 breakdown steals. Those are really the 3 key guys that really pulled it through for you for this Dallas Jackals side.
Yeah, I mean, the only other guy, and I'm just tooting my own horn here, is just Adrian Boyson coming in, that big load of a body, just throwing his body around, getting 20 tackles a game, still leading the league.
Dude, he's
in tackles.
unreal, eh?
That guy is so big.
I'm pretty sure it's him and Sam Gala leading 1 and 2.
He just walks around to every contact zone so he can hit somebody. It's awesome.
Yeah, 10.4 fantasy points, which by all means is not necessarily anything shocking, but when you take into account where from a fantasy stat production point, he only had 39 meters gained, so there's room for improvement there. He's been known to obviously find the try zone. He had that stretch between weeks 9 and 11 where he scored a try in 3 straight games. Didn't have that in this matchup, but like you mentioned, Matt, the 20 tackles, I think it just exaggerates. Adrian Boyson is the perfect example, right, of the shift from what we had last season in our fantasy league versus this season with the addition of stats, right? When you add the tackles, it just adds this layer of security and this layer of consistency that I think we were missing last season in our fantasy stat wise, which made it so volatile. Obviously still volatile this season. We've seen rough weeks, but I think that having that layer of tackles and being able to depend on certain guys like Adrian Boyson, who you know is going to get at least 15 tackles a match, more or less, you can count on him to get almost double-digit points, if not double-digit points every single week.
Yeah, he's got that really nice, safe floor, for a back row player. Just, purely just with tackles basically alone.
And I think that's what might be a highlight heading into next fantasy season, which is crazy to think about, that we're heading towards the playoffs of this season, and it's almost already like Vandy for you. You guys start looking ahead to the 2024 season.
Hey! The knife's still in the wound, boy. Stop burning it, man. It's still in there.
Hey, we want you to make playoffs eventually, man.
Vandy, rebuild year, man. Rebuild year.
Yeah, rebuild.
I'm selling the farm, man.
So,
so am I.
My point being...
All right, safe floor. Let's get back to it.
My point being is that I think when league members and people who are interested in playing fantasy MLR start looking at their roster constructions and look at the way they draft teams, I think there's going to be even a bigger highlight now that we understand kind of who the consistent players are, who the inconsistent players are. Making sure you have that mix moving forward in this season is definitely going to be something that is put into a little bit more thought here moving forward in the world of fantasy MLR.
Andy,
what?
Should you write it down?
All right, shifting on, let's go to the Rugby Atlanta side of things. Despite the loss, I mean, some solid fantasy performers. I will say, this matchup could have probably been a whole lot worse between the Dallas Jackals and Rugby Atlanta if Taringa Waitokia didn't perform the way that he did.
He was a beast.
Converted on, I believe, I want to say both of his tries, but at least one of his tries was off of turnovers, quick turnovers. It wasn't any solid build phase by Rugby Atlanta. And then his ability to kind of navigate through traffic and break tackles basically happened on both of his tries, led to a big time fantasy performance for him. Obviously, the 2 tries, 80 meters gained. Led to one of the best performances of the week. 21.1 fantasy points, 80 meters gained, 2 tries in 82 minutes played. Add 7 tackles to that as well. He was really the brunt of Rugby Atlanta's offensive force, at least from a match standpoint in this one.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, without him, and then I think you said Waito Kia with the late try, but I think it was Talapusi with the late try where he literally looked like he was going to get tackled. And then just decided, nah, I'm gonna get us a little closer and still lose. Who do you
still lose? You just throw that in there.
Yeah, but it was it was a good game by Waitokia. Really came to save the day to help them get closer to a more formidable loss.
Hey, good to see Seth Purdy though, friend of the show.
This
get
is
a
true.
start
and making an impact. He looks like a big boy. Jeez, he didn't look that big on camera.
59 meters gained, 1 try assist, 9 tackles in his appearance over the weekend. First start of the season, 10.1 fantasy points. Not too bad. Always love seeing friends of the show doing good things here in the world of fantasy MLR.
Yeah. And I think the only other guy I want to bring up from Atlanta is Matt Heaton. I mean, Canadian, but 12.5 fantasy points, 36 meters gained, 18 tackles, and 2 steals. That's just like a back row dream right there.
All right. Well, let's get to the game that I know. I know that Vandy wants to be talking about. He's excited about the victory. But hey, it's a big time victory though. Utah at home getting a big time win against the Houston SaberCats, who are neck and neck in the race for that last playoff spot in the Western Conference. 34-28 victory over the weekend for the Utah Warriors. I will say the win gets a little bit less sweet by allowing Houston to score that late try to give them that I believe that bonus point, which allowed them to tie them in the standings here from a point perspective, both of them having 38 points on the season. Utah obviously having the tiebreaker with the more wins over the Houston SaberCats, but again, a little bit tough there. Again, bonus points are so big in Major League Rugby. To give that up is a little bit tough, but nonetheless, big time win there for Utah and the Warriors club.
Hey, sellout arena, 4,500 tickets sold. Place was loud when we had the ball. Joe Mono, though. Mono. Well, I mean, great little try right before the half. Caleb McEnany finds the hole, bursts through it, hits it with speed, offload to Mono on the side. And then him and I think it was Calvin Whiting coming down the wing
he had
together.
A great game, too.
Little bop, bop, bop. And then boom, big try. Comes out the second half. Another huge run by Joel Mono, offload to Joel Hodgson, little play over to Mika Cruz, gets us the lead, and then, just solid gameplay after that.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that we also have to point out, no longer talk about Utah, but Houston side, I mean, Utah, you got to be feeling pretty good now that, Houston is now going to have to go forward, probably without Davey Coates because he didn't look good leaving that game.
No. And that's what led to the try in the second half. That second Joel Mono. The announcer literally said, he goes, that's Davey Coates right there. That's missing Davey Coates.
Yeah. And he's a big part of that offense. Speaking of a big part of that Houston offense, though, I mean, we'll get to him when we talk about the points, but Van Vick, Van Vyk, Van Hattrick, I don't even know.
Yeah, he looked money out there.
Oh yeah,
he looks good. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's start with the Utah Warriors side of it, because there was a whole bunch of names that obviously we had to list. Joe Mono, he had a absolute heater of a game. 175 meters gained in 82 minutes played. Adds the try, 7 tackles, 25.6 fantasy points. He was now back-to-back weeks with over 20 points scored. He is now our 3rd highest ranked player in all of fantasy MLR, just behind JP Duplessis and Nate Augsburger. And he's only behind Nate Augsburger by really 0.3 fantasy points. So Joe Mono, who started to fall back there a little bit, has put himself right back in the fantasy MLR top 5. Absolutely a pivotal player for the Utah Warriors, obviously, and obviously for the fantasy MLR team that owns him, and I believe it is Rugby Morning that does. A couple other guys I want to mention. Mika Cruz, like you said, Vandy doing well in this one. Scores 17.9 fantasy points with the 61 meters gained in the 82 minutes played with that try, 6 tackles, and the try assist as well. And then got to mention 2 other guys, Connor McLeod, Joel Hodgson, both scoring tries for their respective for the Utah Warriors too. And you like to see that both from the scrum half and the fly half position, who often doesn't have necessarily as much point production there. But Connor McLeod, though, he's interesting.
Him with the support lines again. He didn't have to go through a single defender, but he's just reliable, man.
Yeah, 10.7 fantasy points in that 28-meter gain, 1 tri-point performance. Yeah, he's a guy that's kind of, at least these past 2 weeks, has looked pretty dang good. We'll see whether or not that can stick around. And then Joel Hodgson, 16.2 fantasy points with that try, the conversion, the 2 penalty kicks, pretty solid for him. Anyone else?
And shout out to that poor yellow card in the last 10 minutes to give them the room to score the try so they get the bonus point. Shout out conspiracy. Rugby does not want Utah to win games. It's because it's the Bible Belt. You heard it here first, folks. Stay tuned. Conspiracy.
Well, hey, before we touch on that a little more, we got to talk about Kevin Whiting. Not a conspiracy, a beast
not
instead.
A conspiracy.
Yeah.
He had a great game. I think honestly, he started 2 games this year, or 3 games this year, and every time he starts, he has a great game.
Yeah.
And the only other guy I wanted to bring up was Henry Bell. I mean, 2 games in a row as a front row, playing 80 minutes, getting 20 plus tackles in a couple games there, just unreal from the guy. But yeah, unreal. Great win for Utah.
Yeah, haven't seen Kevin Whiting make an appearance in the past couple weeks, but he comes back with a 17-point performance in this one, 60 meters gained, 2 try assists, 15 tackles. And yeah, like you mentioned, Henry Bell playing those full 80 minutes does solid here. He's looked pretty good. I mean, in 3 straight weeks that he's returned and been in the lineup and started, 7.1, 8.4, and then 8.2 in this past week with those 15 meters gained and 19 tackles. Pretty formidable for a front rower in fantasy MLR.
Yeah, it just shows that my preseason ranking was not so far off if he played all year.
We'll see. There's always the caveat, right? There's always the asterisk. All right, shifting
on
over
to win it all.
Whatever, Vandy, you're in blast.
All right, shifting on over to the Houston SaberCats side of things. Again, I think there's only one player that we really need to talk about in this one. Gideon Van Vyk, 20.3 fantasy points was really all the offense for the Houston SaberCats. 3 tries, 42 meters gained, 77 minutes played, 7 tackles. Pretty solid stuff from the big man there in keeping things close for the Utah Warriors and Houston SaberCats match.
The only other guy I think I want to talk about is Veroniki Tikasolo-Mone. I mean, he looked really good on offense, looked really good in the line. He looked really good in the line break. He was breaking tackles. I like the way he played. Maybe didn't show on the fantasy points, but I think that's just a good sign. Good sign for him after coming off a pretty rough week.
Yeah, I'm bitter about him because when I spent $8 fab on him, he didn't play for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, rough go now. You can pick him up again for all the beautiful games you have.
Try him over there.
All right. Shifting over to the second last matchup of the week. Seattle.
We got to talk about this one.
Taking down the Chicago Hounds in an expected result, 35-13 at home. Yep. Really wasn't close at any point in this matchup. I think Chicago might have been leading a little bit at the start there, like 3-0, and then Seattle just really took off. So don't need to talk too much about the game itself.
Well, hold on. We got to talk about something.
Yeah, AJL team getting rocked.
No, I don't even care about
a flag?
I don't even care about that.
Dude,
I don't even care about that. I don't even care. Did you not see the ref talking to the TMO on a cell phone?
Yeah. What was that?
The ref was talking to the TMO on a cell phone. It was a flip phone. It was at a flip front, and this guy is calling him on the cell phone.
He's like, the mark was at the 10 and the 15 meter mark. The what? The 10 and the 15 meter mark.
Where's this guy on speakerphone in Starfire Stadium with snow coming down? This guy's like holding it to his mouth as if he can hear him. Like, what the heck is going on? What is this?
He was ordering a pizza. Bush League? They just brought it to team to make it look better.
Oh, yeah, I see. They just showed Derek Summers. They should have showed the pizza guy coming through.
Buy one, get one Domino's, baby. That's what he was getting.
Oh, my goodness.
Hey, I just want to go back there. Vandy, you got to – we thought we got this out of you, man. What's a flag in rugby?
A tackle where you hit him in the head and you don't wrap him up. That's a flag.
A flag.
All right.
We don't need
card. What
Grow up.
Yeah, come on. I thought we educated you enough here, man.
Not
Come on.
Because I'm
enough.
heated. They all turn. I was about to call it a shutout here in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty
All the
much.
sports are mixing. All right. Well, let's talk about some of these players here on these two sides. Obviously, we're going to start with
Card
Seattle. I think
ref.
the guy that we got to talk about, because he could have had a much bigger performance in this one without that try getting called back. But JP Smith looked dang good in this matchup. One
Finally,
try,
he's back.
could have been two, 56 meters gained, 65 minutes played, 9 tackles, a try assist as well. JP Smith, I think, was one of the best players from the weekend out of all the games for sure.
Yeah, JP Smith looked real good. And it's good to see him kind of coming back into form. He's had a rough few weeks here. But now it seems like, coming back into form. Hopefully he can keep it up. Depending on who I'm playing, I might hope that he doesn't keep it up.
There you go. All right. Well, hey, talk about a guy that's been slow to make a return. Obviously, has dealt with injury all season long. But Ronan Foley, he's obviously started the past 3 weeks with the Seawolves. Not really making much fantasy impact, but in this round 14 makes a big one. 20.2 fantasy points, 108 meters gained, a try, 13 tackles, and 85 minutes played. Good to see Ronan Foley back in the mix, and a guy that I know that I had in my top 5 for back row players. Good to see that he does have the potential to have games like this.
Yeah, I mean, he's really taking advantage of Riker having surgery or suspension again. I'm not sure which one it is, but
One
yeah,
leads into the other.
Well, you never know. But yeah, he's taking advantage. It was good to see him have a great game with that nice little try there. But yeah, it's good to see him back.
All right. And Martin Safo also having a good game. 88
good.
meters gained, a try, and 85 minutes played, 15.6 fantasy points. And then a guy that I also want to mention, just because I feel like I need to mention him every single time I get the chance to, because the guy that's been so under the radar when it comes is Dan Creel. I mean, 119 meters gained, 9 tackles, and 85 minutes played, 15.1 fantasy points on the season so far. He only has 2 weeks that he hasn't scored double-digit fantasy points. The past, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 7 last weeks he scored double-digit fantasy points. This is a guy that's been consistent, has appeared and started in all these matches. Dan Creel is a staple of the Seattle Seawolves fantasy point production.
Yeah, Dan. I mean, enough said there, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. He's right now ranked 5th in our fantasy MLR rankings, which is pretty crazy. I didn't even have Dan Creel in our radar when we were heading into preseason, that's for sure. Anyone else on the Seattle Seawolves side that you want to mention before we shift on over to
let's shift on over to that sorry Chicago Hound side.
All right, again, I mean, it's tough. The Chicago Hounds team, I really don't think there's it's tough to really rely on any of these guys. Again, just the point scoring, the try scoring doesn't happen. You're going to get some consistent, I shouldn't say consistent, but some adequate performances by guys that you kind of know. I mean, Billy Meeks, I would mention in this one.
Bad turnover by him.
104 meters gained. Has the 14.8 fantasy point performance. He's a guy that's been pretty solid this season, despite only having 1 try on the season so far. In this one, 13 tackles, 104 meters gained, like I said, to lead to 14.8 fantasy points. And he's a guy that right now sits in our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Top 15 in our fantasy MLR rankings without playing the first 3 weeks. So he's a guy that is definitely up there. He's a guy that you can rely on. Just I don't think you can expect any crazy
Joe Mono games.
Big time. Exactly. You're not going to get the 25-point games just because of the nature of the Chicago Hounds here. But I mean, Billy Meeks, you won't be mad about 14 fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, those Chicago Hounds stink.
I will mention I will mention another guy, Julian Dominguez. He's looking good.
He was trying to do it on his own so many times. You can see he wants it, man. That guy's got that dog in him.
Yeah. Well, hey, we had the conversation last week.
Dog.
What?
Because the Hounds be losing all the time. Those dogs ain't winning games.
I didn't think of that.
Nice. I will say, we did have that conversation last week, Vandy, I know, and 2 weeks before, whether or not, can you trust some of these guys? Is it starting to seep in with the Chicago Hounds team just because they can't score outside the big names like Billy Meeks? Julian Dominguez was thought to be one of those big names, but after kind of a stretch where he wasn't really performing as well, he does okay. 11.3 fantasy points in this one, had 16.9 in round 13, 9.6 in round 12, 11.1 in round 10. So he's there. He might be a guy that you obviously still rely on, but outside of that, I don't know who else you can really trust.
Chicago Hounds stink.
Bryce Campbell, you can throw
Bryce
in there.
Campbell did have a good game, but look, you don't even know when he's going to be in the lineup or not.
Yeah,
Like it was just a fluke that he was kind of starting this week. I don't know what they're trying, but whatever they're trying, they're still losing.
Yeah, hasn't started the past 2 weeks, comes back to start in this one. Racks up to 17 tackles, which really saved his fantasy performance to get it to that 12.2 fantasy point total. But yeah, again, outside on this team, really no one else. I think Billy Meeks is the one guy you can really, really trust. You can probably throw Julian Dominguez in there. Just out of these guys, don't expect anyone to really be popping off. I will mention McLean Jones just because he scored the lone Chicago Hounds try in this one. 11.8 fantasy points, had the 15 tackles, only 23 meters gained though. But not sure that's a guy that you're really going to be depending on here moving forward. Not a guy that's necessarily been too fantasy relevant for this season, but at least in this past week is somewhat fantasy relevant. So big time win there by Seattle Seawolves against the Chicago Hounds. And then to go to another matchup that really was just a blowout.
Holy cow!
Really had the
stretch calling it a matchup
on your matchup, Vandy, with the stake that you have with the Nola Gold. They obviously didn't even suit up for you in this one. But hey, if you had any New England Free Jacks players, this was an exciting one to have. But I guess the conversation that we'll touch on here is the surprising absence of Bodine Waka as the New England Free Jacks
and Jordan Trainer
their playoff run here. And yeah, no Luke Campbell, no Jordan Trainer in this one.
Why release a graphic with his name on it if you're gonna lie to me? All right.
There's so much to unpack about this match. Honestly, it's the biggest, like, you'd think that this is one of the ones that you don't want to talk about, but when I was watching it, there's just so many different things that were going on. Nola Gold looking like Toronto early in the season. You know, Nola Gold in that first, they had spurts where they were looking good. They were getting into the Free Jacks
defense,
and then they just, New England Free Jacks defense was just killing them. And when they did get close, the goal line defense would force them to make mistakes. Nola Gold would get desperate. They turn the ball over. New England Free Jacks would score another try from their end. You know, it'd be insane. But I'm telling you, Damian Stevens, when he starts these games, he does not give Nola Gold a chance. Just watching him play, it's tough. It's tough to see that their offense just doesn't look the same. But I think the big story of that game was watching Jason Potros take the biggest bump in the entire league. This guy got bumped into next week. I'm worried that he's not playing next week because he's still flying. You know, I saw a tweet that had him on a radar. Too. He's still on a radar flying away. And I'm not surprised. Like, how do you, in one game, you get the best try of the week, best try of the year, you get the best bump in the year, and you get the worst performance of the year all in one match. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's actually jokes. I didn't see that graphic.
The Rugby Network tweeting out Jason Potros is still flying from this bump off. And
I saw that. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, when I told you like 5 weeks ago, Jason Potros did not like the tackle. He does not like the tackle.
No.
Neither do I.
That's true. It's just
that's why he's a kicker.
Nature of a halfback, man.
Yeah,
that's how it goes. But
fair point, Bodine Waka. Where are you at, though?
Where are you at? And I mean, from a fantasy perspective, $69 dropped on him earlier when the announcement was made. Again, we had that conversation earlier about talking about, hey, is he worth the fab money with the risk that's involved? Because are you gonna going forward? If he's in the lineup, are you trusting him? You know what I mean? Even coming off the bench, we can't expect that he's gonna be starting anytime soon.
He came off the bench last week and he did nothing.
Sure.
He actually kind of sucked. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be kind of blunt with it. He kind of sucked.
And I mean, from a New England Free Jacks perspective, I mean, why
change anything?
Why change it? Everything's been working. You've been having a fantastic season so far.
Probably still speaking Japanese on the field and just forgot. What do you think?
You might have a point. But yeah, it's been working with Jason Potros at 10. It's been working with Reese McDonald at 15. Both guys that looked pretty solid in this one that we'll get into here, obviously. But yeah, I mean, why change anything? And then shifting over again, I think that this Nola Gold team, there's a whole bunch of concerns. Are you concerned, Matt? Because obviously you have stake heading into playoffs with this team. You obviously have JP Duplessis in this one.
Well,
what's your mindset with Nola?
They're not winning the chip. I think we've established that. They're not winning the chip.
You've sailed that boat, eh?
Yeah, that boat has officially sailed. Last week, but this week officially. That the Eastern Conference still sucks. But no, I mean, JP Duplessis is one of those guys that just, I don't think they look this bad every week. And I think JP Duplessis always finds a way to make an impact, whether that's defensively or offensively. Yeah, he maybe didn't get double-digit points, But at the end of the day, you're never not going to start JP Duplessis. And,
yeah, it's true.
I'm perfectly fine with getting 9-10 points from him on a bad week.
Sure. All right, let's talk about some of these players then. We'll start off with the New England Free Jacks side of things. If I told you at the start of the fantasy MLR season that Wyan Conradi would be your number 1 back rower on the year, would you have believed me? Because this guy has been absolutely electric. He started every single match that he's appeared in. He hasn't scored lower than 10 fantasy points all season long, and he's coming off of his best fantasy point performance of the season in round 14. 28.1 total fantasy points, 138 meters gained. Oh yeah, 21 tackles too, 2 breakdown steals, and a try there as well in 80 minutes played. Man, this guy can absolutely do it all. 4th best fantasy MLR player in our rankings right now.
This New England Free Jack back row is just ridiculous.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He's ridiculous. He looked good. And if we're going to talk about him, we might as well talk about Slade McDowell.
Yeah.
He looked good. It's just
15 tackles. Doesn't really translate to fantasy as much. I mean, again, this is kind of going back to the notion of he still got 10.3 fantasy points. When you have those tackle numbers, you're able to kind of save those fantasy days. 10 points is not going to kill you for sure. And then shifting over to some of the other guys that have scored a whole bunch of points. Obviously, Mitch Wilson having a big time matchup, cashing in on tries on the outside, 2 tries, 126 meters gained, 7 tackles, and only the 58 minutes he played, 24.2 total fantasy points. And then Balakena, I mean, he scored 2 tries in this one. His second try, man, how nice of an offload was that from Poland? I mean,
it was both. I mean, offload from Balakena to Poland, offload from Poland back to Balakena, try in the corner. It was just, everybody was saying it was the try of the season, and it's hard to argue with that.
And Balakena might be one of the top waiver wire pickups of the season this year, because after having a dud of round 1 and a dud of round 6, he's scored double-digit fantasy points. He has gone 6 straight weeks of scoring above 14.6 fantasy points. That's crazy. And out of those 6 straight weeks, he's scored in 5 of them, coming off of obviously this 2-try performance with 18.2 fantasy points. Pretty incredible stuff there.
Yeah. And we got to talk about Reese McDonald. This red-headed, fiery. I think he's from New Zealand. I don't know. But back-to-back unreal weeks. This week, he looked exceptionally well. He was running around everywhere. I mean, it's easy to look good on these weeks, but he looked really good. He was an integral part of that offense. And with him playing like that, Ryan, like you said, it's tough to bring Bodine Walker in at 15. It's tough to bring him in at 10. I don't even know where he fits in this offense at this point.
Yeah, 17.6 fantasy points for Reese McDonald. Another guy I want to mention as well, Wayne Vanderbank looked pretty solid too. He had a pretty solid fantasy point performance, 19.1, 84 meters gained, 19 tackles, 1 try for him. Anyone else on this New England Free Jacks side that we want to mention? I think we've covered them all.
I mean, it felt like we went through the whole team.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, Kyle Sakara also doing pretty well too. 35 meters, 12 tackles, and a try. So pretty solid stuff there. All right, shifting over to Nola Gold. There was about nothing. I mean, you can talk about Moni Tonga-Uiha. Did I say it right?
Good enough.
Good enough. 160 meters gained, 13 tackles for him. He was probably the only guy. Again, Nola not scoring try in this one. It's not going to translate into fantasy points, but Monty was able to get 16.5 fantasy points. Meters gained.
Yeah, I mean, it was good to see Tom Florence back. He didn't really have that great of a week. Jordan Jackson Hope out of the lineup, I think that also contributed big to their loss, and he's a big contributor who you would usually see a lot of points for. So maybe that's also contributing to why JB Duplessis maybe had a down week too. But yeah, not much from that Nola Gold side. So yeah, let's keep it moving.
Keep it moving. All right. I think that's about done. Wraps it up for round 14. Pretty exciting stuff. Like I said, it felt like this week we had a pretty solid number of fantasy point performers in this one, just because we had a whole lot of points scored outside of a couple teams, obviously singling out the Nola Gold, singling out the Chicago Hounds. But outside of that, even for teams that typically, aren't really scoring as much against in some of these matches, like the Arrows and Dallas Jackals, they were able to perform in this one, which obviously lends itself to an exciting fantasy MLR week. Just to kind of give a wrap up, because now the regular season for this fantasy year is done as we head into playoffs. who are the top players of the league? We mentioned a couple of them here, but JP Duplessis, surprisingly, which just goes to show you how crazy of a season he's had in the middle parts. After having some pretty down weeks, he's still sitting as the number 1 fantasy point performer on our season so far by 13 points. It's not even close.
So who's the guy in second?
Nate Augsburger is second. He's coming off the bye this week, 184.8. Ridiculous. Joe Mano coming in at third. We mentioned him earlier before with 184.5. Wyon Karate, we just talked about, 177.4 at the 4 spot, is our top back rower. Dan Creel, we mentioned earlier as well, 174.1 to round out the top 5. So pretty crazy. I mean, it's going to be interesting to look back on these names because there's a whole bunch of them, Matt, that are in this top 15.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it,
that we didn't even see coming. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all breaks down.
Yeah, really building our credibility.
Yeah, honestly. That's why it's called fantasy.
I was going to say, that's fantasy for you, buddy.
That is fantasy for you. All right. Let's shift on over to a quick kind of waiver wire discussion. Not so much to discuss who's available and what's going on, but kind of mindset for how you approach waiver wire when it comes to playoffs. Because it's always hard to kind of rely on guys that you obviously haven't used throughout the season. So are there names in this waiver wire that you would maybe turn to? We look at some of the teams that are on bye this week.
Nola Gold and Dallas.
Nola Gold and Dallas. So 2 teams that you're really not going to be missing as much, but hey, you never know. You might have some key guys that you may need to turn to, or at least to kind of round out just in case there's any shocking lineup changes, because that's something that league members are going to have to watch out as well as we get towards the tail of the season. We saw it last week. Vandy and I talked about it in last episode about how we're seeing some of these weird lineup changes. Maybe for some of these teams that are doing really, really well, want to rest some of those guys, or maybe some of the guys that, or some of the teams that aren't doing so well, who are like, hey, maybe it's time to start giving some of these guys a rest.
To me, playoff time, it's all about matchups. You're dropping guys to get favorable matchups any day of the week. And I'm looking at 3 right here. You're looking at New England Free Jacks versus the Arrows, Houston Sabercats versus the Hounds. And Van, you're going to like this one, Utah versus Atlanta. I think that's a great matchup. So you're looking at, your Free Jacks guys. I see Reese McDonald there in free agency. You're looking at Drew Wild, Houston Sabercats over there. And I mean, the Utah guys, everybody seems to have scooped them up. So it's kind of tough to look there. Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
so Lamone is still available.
That's true. Well. Also him as well. So those are the kind of matchups I'd go for. I think guys that you haven't started all year, what would make you think that you're going to start them in playoffs? There's essentially only bye this week, and I think there's no more buys for the rest of the year. There may be 1 or 2, but you don't have as many buys to worry about. You're trying to win every week at this point. So you're dropping guys, and there's 4 teams or 5 teams less that are fighting for guys to pick up.
Well, this is the time of the season where it's start your studs, start the guys that got you there. You can dream. I agree with the matchup thing, within reason. Like, you're not just going to go play Marcos Young because he's on the free agent and he's, who does Old Glory got this week?
Well, they've got Seattle.
So yeah, you wouldn't even try that. But you know what I mean? I always love the mindset of start your studs.
I mean, I guess so. This is, I would say, probably the biggest question, because I think this type of kind of lineup decision is going to reflect a bunch of lineup decisions that are going to be made. Would you start Julian Dominguez against the Houston Sabercats, or would you start Reese McDonald against the Toronto Arrows?
I'd start Dominguez just because Houston's looking a little beat up now, especially if they're missing Davey Coates.
Oh, you beat him one time, eh?
That's right, buddy.
One time.
That's right.
All beat up.
Yeah.
What do you think you guys do? You guys took a hammer to him?
No, what we do is we take our star players and just dust you with them.
Whatever.
So what about you, Matt? I feel like for me, that's a tough decision. Because
I mean, that's a tough one. For me, playoffs, you're not going to win by just playing safe. So, you come in there, you take Reese McDonald, a guy who had coming off 2 unreal weeks. You can get 15, 16 points from him, but knowing that, hey, you might get 3 or 4. Sure. So I think it's kind of a risk you have to take. And at the end of the day, if you pick him up on waivers, you can always go back. You're not going to drop Julian Dominguez for Reese McDonald.
Sure.
But you can always make that decision depending on the lineup, what that looks like. If you see Bodine Waka on the bench, Reese McDonald's going to come off at some point.
Yeah. Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Very good point.
So you might want to play it that way. I think a lot of things are going to come out with these lineups going into the end of the year.
Sure. All right, let's shift on over now to look ahead to round 15. Again, we're heading into our very first playoff round. Matt, Rugby Morning, both got buys finishing 1 and 2. So we got our 3 facing 6 and our 4 facing 5 in this round 15. Going to be an interesting one. So what are the games that are going to lend itself to that exciting first round of fantasy MLR playoffs?
They finally figured out how to schedule games.
There you go.
Week 6. What week is it, Ryan?
15.
It is
week 15, and they figured it out. So good for them. Way to go,
Learning
MLR.
as we
You
go.
did it.
Learning as we go. All right, opening up the first matchup, the Toronto Arrows are leaving Canada and moving south of the border. Not too far, though. They're going to New England to take on the Free Jacks for the first matchup of the weekend. Again, I think, Matt, you alluded to this. I mean, I am playing all my New England Free Jacks players, and honestly, I'm probably benching all my Arrows guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not.
Maybe not Ross Brody.
Maybe not Tassie, but I would say that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, Free Jacks again, Vanny. We mentioned it last episode.
Their defense,
they're a defensive juggernaut. They have the least amount of points against in the entire league by not even a close margin.
And look at their ability to blow teams out of the water, man, and not even give you a chance to get some points.
And Toronto's a much worse team.
Exactly.
Right, and you can't even lend themselves as them being the Arrows at home, where we usually give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. But here, I mean, number 1 team by far in the Eastern Conference, the New England
Free Jacks.
Number 1
crowd in the league.
You got guts if you're playing a Toronto Arrows player.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so I think we're all on the same page here. I think the New England Free Jacks are taking this one pretty handedly. And again, I think you'll be quite happy if you have a lot of New England Free Jacks stock heading into this weekend. All right, next matchup of the weekend, Old Glory DC taking on the Seattle Seawolves at home. This is going to be an interesting one. Old Glory DC obviously needs the win. They need to stay in that playoff hunt, but they're taking on a tough Seattle team that's sitting second in the Western Conference. We know how competitive that Eastern Conference playoff race is. It's going to be interesting. I mean, we have seen Seattle falter through periods of time through the season. We've seen Old Glory DC look very, very good at times this season, but we've also seen them look not so good. So what's kind of your mindset going into this one? Are you worried to play Old Glory DC guys or Seattle Seawolves guys locks? It's interesting.
You know what? Old Glory is one of those teams I'm always hard on, and they always seem to kind of come out and play pretty well. I'm not going to say they're going to win, but I wouldn't be too concerned starting a couple of your big time guys.
Yeah, I agree. I gotta agree there. Old Glory DC, they always have that chance of coming out. And really showing. You know, they've had a lot of games where they've been in there.
Like Fernanda Schultz, Talatina, Vanilla.
Yeah,
they're starting those guys.
Yeah, there's guys in Old Glory DC where you'll definitely start. And I honestly wouldn't even shy away from that Old Glory DC squad. Just they always find a way to kind of put in points.
They got that dog in them.
And Seattle Seawolves, I mean, you're taking advantage. Again, I think Ronan Foley's going to be a good play in this one. Obviously, he's taking advantage, like you mentioned, of the absence of Riker Hadding. JP Smith looking incredible. Dan Creel. Like, I mean, I would play all my Seattle Seawolves guys in this one, to be honest. But at the end of the day, I do think it's Seattle that's coming away with the victory in this one.
Is it going to be AJ Altimu or Jordan Shate?
That's the big question.
I think they're both going to play.
Yeah, I think
they could go back to that whole Jordan Chait at 10 and Alatimu at the center position once again.
Yeah, true.
That's been a whole dynamic that's been
that's wild. That's tough.
Especially with how crazy AJ was for a fantasy perspective last season. It's interesting it's going to be interesting to reflect on that at the end of the year. But yeah, I think we all got Seattle Seawolves winning this one.
I would agree.
Yeah.
All right. Shifting on over now to the next matchup, the Houston SaberCats taking on the Chicago Hounds at home. This is a big one for Houston. They got to get back in the win column to stay within that Western Conference playoff race. I'm scared of all my Chicago Hounds players. I am, even Billy Meeks. I am worried. I am very, very worried. I'm not benching Billy Meeks, but I think he's kind of similar to the Toronto Arrows kind of situation. He's probably the only guy that I'm playing.
Yeah.
If I'm in a pinch, I would play Reese McDonald if Bodine Waka is not on the bench. And I would play Reese McDonald over Julian Dominguez. So I think that just goes to show you the confidence level that we have in the Chicago Hounds side. Houston, it's interesting because they have good weeks where they're offensively, solid and they put out, solid fantasy performance. But I mean, this past week they put up points, but it's not like that was spread around. It was really just Gideon Van Vyk cashing that in for the most part of it. There's not some of those backline guys now with the absence of David Coates, who we don't know is going to be in this lineup.
Yeah,
I don't think Houston is losing this matchup, obviously, against the Chicago Hounds, but I'm not too sure if from a fantasy perspective, we're going to see a lot of points being scored by a robust number of players that is going to lend itself to, having good weeks and having trust in this Houston SaberCats squad.
Yeah, I think this will be the lowest scoring game of the week.
Yeah, I can see that. I was going to say that too, but look, I think Gideon Van Vyk, I think some of those big key guys, Christian Dyer, Drew Wild, Dom McKenna, I think they're going to carry them forward, carry them through to the win.
I can see Dom McKenna having a game, man.
It's the Hounds. They stink.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're on consensus with this one. I think Houston's taking this one at home for sure.
Come on, give us a hard matchup to choose.
Yeah, I mean, we'll shift on this one. I feel like the Utah Warriors Rugby Atlanta one is going to be interesting. I think it's not necessarily a one that's going to be hard to make the decision on who's going to come out on top. Obviously, not impressive when you're losing to the Dallas Jackals the week before, and Utah obviously having the impressive performance against the SaberCats in this week. I think, in the same mindset. There are select guys with this Rugby Atlanta team that I'm happy to play.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm going with Tarangatira Waitokia. I'm going with if Ruida Biddle is in that lineup, I'm putting him in as well. But not a lot of confidence here with this Rugby Atlanta team, especially when a lot's on the line in the playoffs. Utah Warriors side, though, pretty confident with a lot of these guys. Joe Mano playing, Kalamakani I'm playing.
Kruse,
Hodgson.
Honestly, Whiting, if he's in the starting
lineup. Yeah, if he's in the starting, man, him at center has just been a treat.
Yeah.
So should be solid. Anyone and same mindset there. I mean, I think Utah wins this one pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I think Rugby Atlanta just looks really bad.
Come on.
Continuing to show why they should be in that playoff spot.
What I think it's going to come down to, which is very interesting, between the Houston SaberCats taking on the Hounds and the Utah Warriors taking on Rugby Atlanta. Obviously, the Utah Warriors have the tiebreaker because they have the one more win. But I think it's going to come down to a bonus point again. Like, can both of these teams get a bonus point against these respective squads that they're facing in this week? Because I think that could.
I think to Vandy's point, though, Utah has a better chance of getting a bonus point than Houston, because I think that Houston Chicago game might be a little bit low scoring.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So whether Houston can rack up 4 tries, I don't know.
Sure. All right. Well, 2 teams that were on bye in round 14. This is the matchup of the week in round 15. The San Diego Legion welcoming in the New York Ironworkers into town in the Seoul matchup on Sunday. Should be an exciting one.
Yep.
Again, I think there's been a lot of hype with the San Diego Legion team. For me, the question really becomes the New England Free Jacks are really inching up and earning their spot as possibly, for me, being the number 1 team in the MLR. But I think that's because of recency bias, and we just haven't seen San Diego Legion in a little bit have that dominant performance. Also coming
They've
off
had a couple tough weeks.
Exactly, and also coming off the bye. So I think this one will be a big indicator of where that kind of shifts.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm playing guys on both sides of the ball in this one.
I'm
confident with my Legion guys, especially. Remember, in that round 13 matchup that they had before they went on bye, a lot of interesting lineup decisions there. They didn't have Mikey Teo wasn't in the lineup to start. Ma'ananu wasn't there to at all in the lineup. So there were some interesting changes there. And then obviously on the New York Ironworkers side of things, I mean, they have obviously always the ability to score a decent amount of points. They've been kind of up and down this season, but I mean, Andrew Coe has been on fire this season so far. It'll be interesting to see what happens at the 10 spot. I would probably count on Jason Emery slotting back in there, and he's been an adequate fly half for you when he's been starting at that position. So going to be interesting to see there. But for me, at least in my eyes, I'm starting both these sides, guys that you're confident in. But at the end of the day, I do think it's San Diego that's going to come up on top of this one, but I don't think it's going to be as convincing of a win. It's going to be another one of those kind of back and forth affairs, and San Diego is going to squeak out a win there just because of the talent that they have.
Yeah, it's tough. That's San Diego defense too, with the second least amount of points given. You know, they're a force to be reckoned with too. So it's certain guys like would you feel confident with playing guys like Dylan Fawcett?
Yeah, I mean, Dylan Fawcett's a hard guy not to play, you know.
That's true.
In the front row,
that's a tough one. Yeah, and New York always relies on their pack once they get inside the 5.
True.
Yeah.
He's a tough guy not to play. I think it's more like you're looking at some of these fringe guys like, you know, Hamish Dalzell, the second row, or do you play you know, who's going to be at 15 for them? That's the question. Do you play them? Is it going to be Sam Windsor? Is it going to be Brooklyn Hardiker or whoever? You know, obviously the second guy you don't play, but like I think there's some decisions where you got to look at New York and be like, they're going to run into a tough San Diego team.
Yeah, it all depends what kind of New York you're going to get.
Yeah, and you never know what they're line up to. I mean, sometimes you just can't tell.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And obviously that's been spurred by the injury of Jack Hayden, obviously.
Yeah. But speaking of all that, I'm going to go New York this week, actually.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I'm
okay.
going New York.
That'd be huge. That'd make things very, very interesting.
I think New York has the ability to make things interesting. I think they can come out. And also the big thing for me is San Diego before the bye. And, you go into the bye week with sometimes a bye week can come at a good time. But sometimes a bye week is a way of where the last thing that you remember playing is playing, yes, getting a win, but not playing so great. I think that maybe carries over, and New York is kind of one of those teams that can definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, hey, should be an exciting round 15 of rugby and obviously fantasy MLR. Again, heading into the first round of our fantasy MLR playoffs, the journey to get their name etched on the championship jersey behind me begins. Going to be an exciting one. We got the first round this week. Obviously got our semifinals next week and our finals to follow after that. And it all starts now with some of these matchups in round 15 that are going to be a big indicator. And we'll see who the heroes are for some of these league members as they move forward. Because Vandy, and for you as someone who's played a lot of fantasy sports, this is where your attachments become. The guys that pull through for you in these do or die moments where you're like, okay, you know what? Andrew Coe's my guy.
Start your studs, man. That's what it is.
He's the guy that
start him this week, Vandy.
Connection.
I'm gonna start this week.
All right. Well, hey, enjoy the matchups in round 15. Again, pay attention to all the fantasy MLR going on here. Tune into the fantasyruckers.com. You'll be able to see all the latest updates there and how fantasy players are doing. And of course, all across our social media channels as well at the Fantasy Ruckers. Again, we're continuing to try to grow this thing, and we hope that more people can experience this playoff thrill when it comes to fantasy MLR in the near future. And we're continuing to work that. You'll find out if that's a possibility on those channels as well. Any final words, Matt, for the guys that will be duking it out to face you in 2 weeks' time?
Hey, look, good luck. Maybe the guys that are thinking of trying to pull an upset don't, because you're just going to lose in the next round. So,
got them.
Try your best, but just know your fate is coming.
All right, Vandy. Outside looking in, a message to the league members.
You know what? Good luck. Have fun with it. And please take down Matt. Please. Please do it.
I knew that was coming.
We want it. Matt, you want it. The world wants it.
Come on, not the
Hell,
world.
even Ryan wants it.
We can't go there.
All right. Well, hey, for Matt Yee, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, make sure you enjoy round 15's matchups. Enjoy the first round of Fantasy MLR playoffs, and we'll see you next week here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Playoffs?
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.